Greetings, seekers of hidden knowledge, and welcome to Overheard Nation. Are you ready to uncover a secret that the history books decided to leave out? To understand how a city can be erased from history, you must first understand what that city was. In the final years of the 19th century, Wilmington, North Carolina, was not a quiet town. It was a unique beacon of progress in the American South. It was the state's largest metropolis, a bustling port teeming with life, its economy driven by cotton and timber. But its true richness was not in its cargo holds, it was in its people. Wilmington was home to a powerful and growing black middle class, a reality unheard of in most of the nation. The city directory listed over 100 black-owned businesses. There were black doctors and respected lawyers, skilled artisans, and property owners. The city's largest newspaper, the Daily Record, was black-owned and operated, a powerful voice for the community. This was not a marginalized population, this was a people building wealth, influence, and a future. This economic power translated directly into political power. The city was run by a legally elected fusionist government, a progressive coalition of white populists and black Republicans who had united against the old guard of white supremacist Democrats. This was not a token arrangement. In 1898, Wilmington had black magistrates, black policemen, and black firemen. They served on the city council and the board of auditors alongside their white counterparts, governing a city where more than half the population was African American. For a fleeting, shining moment in history, Wilmington represented a functioning, biracial democracy. It was an exception to the rising tide of segregation sweeping the nation, a place built not on suppression, but on the promise of shared governance and mutual prosperity. And it was this very success, this very beacon of hope, that sealed its doom. But this island of progress existed in an ocean of resentment. For North Carolina's Democratic Party, a party built on the ideology of white supremacy, the success of Wilmington was an intolerable aberration. They had lost political and economic ground after the Civil War, and they were determined to reclaim it through a carefully orchestrated campaign of fear. The assault began not with bullets, but with words. Josephus Daniels, the powerful editor of the Raleigh News and Observer, used his newspaper as a weapon. Day after day, he published a relentless stream of racist editorials, incendiary political cartoons, and fabricated stories designed to stoke the fears of the white population. This media campaign created a false narrative of Negro domination, painting a picture of a city under siege by an incompetent and dangerous black populace. They were manufacturing an enemy where there was none, providing the ideological fuel for the fire to come. This war of words was backed by the promise of physical violence. Paramilitary groups, calling themselves the Red Shirts, began to organize and march openly. Their leader was Alfred Moore Waddell, a former Confederate officer and congressman, a man who possessed both a powerful voice and a deep-seated hatred. Waddell's speeches were not veiled threats, they were open calls for bloodshed. Standing before armed crowds, he declared that they must retake control of the city by the ballot or by the bullet, even if we have to choke the Cape Fear River with carcasses. The threat was explicit. The promise of violence hung heavy in the air, and Wilmington's atmosphere of hope began to curdle into one of fear and dread. The storm was no longer on the horizon, it was directly overhead. The storm broke with the dawn on Thursday, November 10, 1898. The pretext for the violence was an editorial written by Alexander Manley, the editor of the city's black-owned newspaper, the Daily Record. In his article, Manley had dared to challenge the racist hypocrisy surrounding relationships between black men and white women. For the conspirators, this was the final insult they claimed they could not bear. It was the spark they needed to ignite the fire. Alfred Waddell made good on his promises of violence. He led a disciplined mob of nearly 2,000 armed white men through the streets of Wilmington. Their first target was the source of their manufactured outrage. They marched on the Daily Record building, broke down the doors, and systematically destroyed the printing press inside, tossing its components into the street. They looted the offices, and then they set the building ablaze, watching as the most powerful black voice in the state was consumed by flames. But this act of arson was merely the prelude. From the smoldering ruins, the mob, now a self-declared committee, marched on City Hall. They were not negotiating, they were issuing an ultimatum. Waddell and his lieutenants stormed the building and confronted the legally elected city government. At gunpoint, Mayor Silas P. Wright, the entire board of aldermen, and the chief of police were forced to sign pre-written resignation letters. The democratic process was executed in a matter of minutes. Waddell was immediately elected as the new mayor by his own mob. With the city's leadership overthrown and political power seized, the organized violence escalated into a citywide massacre. The red shirts and other armed white groups were unleashed upon the black community. They roamed the streets with impunity, firing into homes and businesses. They dragged black men from their workplaces and shot them in broad daylight. The City of Hope became a hunting ground, its streets running red as the state-sanctioned terror sought to cleanse Wilmington of its black citizens and their influence, once and for all. In the days that followed the massacre, a chilling silence fell upon Wilmington. It was not the silence of peace, but of terror and submission. The coup was complete. The new, illegitimate government, led by Mayor Alfred Waddell, moved swiftly to cement its power. They immediately passed new city ordinances and worked to create a new city charter, effectively stripping away all remaining political rights from the black population and laying the groundwork for the era of Jim Crow laws across the entire state. The cleansing of the city continued, but now with the veneer of official authority. A so-called Secret Nine committee drew up a list of influential black leaders and their white allies who had not already fled. One by one, these men were arrested, taken to the train station at gunpoint, and banished from the city they had helped build. They were forced to leave behind their families, their homes, and their businesses, which were often sold for pennies on the dollar or simply taken over by members of the mob. Wilmington was being systematically and permanently emptied of its most successful black citizens. This physical removal was followed by a war on memory itself. The conspirators, now the city's undisputed rulers, launched their coordinated press campaign to control the narrative. The story sent to national newspapers was not one of a violent overthrow of a government, but of a regrettable race riot, which they, the white leaders, had bravely put down to restore order. This false narrative became the official history. For nearly a century, this lie was cemented in textbooks and public memory. The men who orchestrated the massacre were not condemned as traitors, they were celebrated in monuments and in classrooms as the redeemers who had saved the city. The story of the only successful coup d'état on American soil was not just forgotten, it was deliberately and methodically buried under the weight of a great, suffocating silence, a silence that would last for generations. But history, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of returning to the light. The great silence over Wilmington could not last forever. For decades, while official records propagated a lie, the true story of the coup was kept alive. It was preserved in hushed tones, passed down through the generations of the families who were exiled, a painful but vital part of their oral tradition. It was a memory that refused to die. Then, at the turn of the 21st century, a new generation of historians, journalists, and community activists began to challenge the silence. Armed with these family stories, they dug through state archives, uncovered suppressed documents, and cross-referenced old newspaper articles, painstakingly piecing together the real, violent truth of what happened in 1898. They gave a voice to the victims who had been silenced for so long. This decades-long effort culminated in 2006, when the North Carolina General Assembly published the final report of the 1898 Wilmington Race Riot Commission. After more than a century, the truth was officially acknowledged. The state-sanctioned report condemned the event for what it was, a carefully planned, violent, and illegal overthrow of a legitimate government, driven by white supremacy. The false narrative of a race riot was finally, officially, dismantled. Today, historical markers stand in Wilmington, naming the events and its victims, placed where buildings once burned and where people once fell. They serve as a testament to a brutal chapter of American history, but also as a powerful symbol of the fight to restore memory. The story of the Wilmington insurrection is more than a forgotten event, it is a profound reminder that history is never truly in the past. It is a living thing, whose echoes shape the present, and whose truths, however long they are silenced, eventually demand to be heard. Thanks for exploring this secret with us. For more stories forgotten by history, subscribe now and hit the bell so you never miss the next investigation.